No, it's on my agenda.
Yes. Hopefully, because it should be quite interesting. They have a actually digital arts museum there at Atelier Boumier that I'm really hoping to check out. It should be interesting for our purposes. Yeah, she's doing great. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started here. Assuming you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Hey everybody, welcome to the monthly EFF Austin meetup. For those of you who are new, my name is Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of the board here at EFF Austin. For those of you who wandered in, like, what is EFF Austin? We are a long-standing local digital civil liberties group. We are closely affiliated with Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is based out of San Francisco. They're the country's premier digital civil liberties organization. Basically, they fight for protecting your rights in emerging technological spaces, net neutrality, end-to-end encryption, right to privacy online. Most recently, trying to protect Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, but they do a lot of good stuff. And so for those of you who came out and are new, which I actually see a lot of new faces tonight, welcome. So I'm going to do a couple brief announcements here before I turn it over to our speaker, just to let you know what we have coming up. So as I already sort of mentioned, one of the big things in the digital civil liberties space right now is the coming emerging fight over Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. For those of you who are like, well, what the dang is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act? You should come to our September meetup, where our board member, Ritika Gopal, is going to be giving a rundown of what the law is and why it is so important to preserving freedom of speech online. It's a very interesting situation where you see both Republicans and Democrats going after this law, which is a sign that that law might actually be doing something really good, actually, if everybody wants to get rid of it, actually, weirdly enough. We're also going to have a few other interesting talks coming up. I think our October talk is most likely going to be on regulation around the utility industry, so very sort of nerdy utility law regulation, so that one should be pretty interesting as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on the dock I need to make you all aware of. Oh, also, as I was saying, relevant to sort of Section 230, so this is August, also known as the Congressional Recess, which means that our elected representatives are home from Washington, D.C. to meet with their constituents right now. EFF would like organizations like EFF Austin, groups around the country who are members of the EFA, the Electronic Frontier Alliance, they would like people who care about these issues to reach out to their congressional representatives and urge them to save Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So if that's something you might be interested in being involved in, you should definitely reach out to us. I will probably not be leading that effort because I'm about to be out of town for a couple weeks, but David's one of our board members. You can get with him about that. I'm also going to leave a few business cards here that have my email if you would like to get in touch with me about that. Let's see. So I'm going to turn things over to our speaker here in just a sec. I'm actually going to have to jet in just a sec because, as I said, I'm about to be out of town for 2 weeks. But yeah, let me just pull up my little intro thing here real quick. Just 1 second. Oh yeah, but yeah, sorry, I was trying to pull it up. Yeah, just my phone was having some weird bug in my email client. All right, so okay, so yes, our speaker this month is Hussam Majoub. Hussam is a Sudanese activist. He's also a telecommunications professional and a spokesperson of both the initiative to restore the Sudanese Engineers Syndicate and the Sudanese ICT Advisory Group, or SICTA. He's also one of the founders of Sudan Bukra TV channel. Professionally, he's experienced in Internet of Things and M2M mobile telecommunications, and he is a program in strategic management for the U.S., Africa, and Middle East regions. He currently works for Taili's Group's Digital Identity and Security Business Unit, formerly Jamalco, which is a global digital security and telecommunications supplier. Before joining them, he worked for leading telecommunications providers in the United Arab Emirates and Sudan. He also holds an executive MBA degree from London Business School, an MSc of Electrical Engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology, and a BSc in Electrical Engineering from United Arab Emirates University in Al Ain, United Arab Emirates. Yeah, I mean, you have frankly one of the most impressive resumes of any of our speakers. It's really quite impressive. And yes, if you're curious about more of his exploits, you can check his meetup page. He also founded the Sudanese Cinema Club in Abu Dhabi. He's done so much cool stuff.
You don't have to go through all this.
I just found your bio. Really. Well, I like to tee our speakers up. And so anyway, Hussam's going to be basically going over sort of the state of the internet and sort of the fight for freedom of expression online and the way politics and the internet intersect, and basically using Sudan as kind of a case study. He's going to talk about telecommunications in Sudan, sort of the Arab Spring revolutions. He's going to talk about the June-July 2019 internet shutdown in Sudan, why it's all going on, the impacts, what we can maybe do about it. Oh, and it's fine, we just wanted to say that when he finishes up his talk, we usually go over to Firehouse Hostel and Lounge for drinks and camaraderie. I normally lead that. I won't be here, obviously, but any of you who want to go over there, that's usually our ritual if you'd like to just hang out afterwards. And, and I encourage you to ask our speaker any questions you have. We definitely like to encourage lively audience participation and debate. So, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Hussam, and thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin, for this. Thank you for the invite. And thank you all to come here and listen to me. This is, well, it is titled Sudan, Political Revolution and Internet Shutdown. And and you see three different logos here. As Kevin said, I'm one of the spokespersons of the Sudanese, the initiative to restore the Sudanese Engineers Syndicate, and I'm one of the spokespersons of Sudan ICT Advisory Group, SICTA, and I'm one of the founders of that Sudan Bukra in Arabic. So Sudan Bukra satellite TV channel, that's literally Sudan tomorrow. But the whole thing is actually SICTA. So this presentation was prepared and with the help of mostly my colleagues at SICTA. That's why you would see SICTA logo from now on. And I'll talk about Sudan, an introduction. I'll give you an introduction about Sudan. What is Sudan? Where is Sudan? Why are we talking about it? And I'll give you a brief, some facts about the telecom sector in Sudan. Then I'll talk about the social media, internet shutdowns and revolution. So this is with an emphasis of what happened in the Arab Spring back in 2011 and the context of the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And finally, we'll turn on to Sudan revolution. I'll give you a timeline about the revolution, the timeline of the revolution, the internet shutdown, why it happened, how, the impact and alternatives, and now what. So I'm very passionate about Sudan. So if you feel bored or if you feel that I'm giving you too much information, stop me. If you need to ask questions, or if if you have any questions at any point, stop me, ask me. At the end of this presentation, I'll play a slideshow of photos from Sudan, so that will give you also some time to focus away from me. This is Sudan. Okay, yeah, okay. So this is Africa map. This is Sudan. And for those of you who remember, it used to be one country, Sudan, the Republic of Sudan, until 2011 when it separated. Our South Sudan voted for independence from Sudan, so it is now the Republic of Sudan, this part, and then the Republic of South Sudan, the southern part of it. Before the separation, Sudan was the largest country in Africa, area-wise, and it was the number 9th and then 10th area-wise in the world after the Soviet Union collapsed. It became the 10th in the world. Now, after this separation, it is the 3rd largest country in Africa. It's relatively about 1/5 the size of the United States, so it's not a small country. 1.86 million square kilometers, 43 million people. We are neighboring Egypt to our north, Libya, and then to our east, Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan, Chad, and Central African Republic. Before the separation, we used to have borders with Kenya, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then we have a very long coastline across along the Red Sea, which separates us from Saudi Arabia. The geopolitics of the region are important in what happened in this revolution. So these are simplifications, but because you have to give some information. But we say that the Sudanese are mostly Africans. Some of them think, or they are Arabs. So it's Arabs, Africans, and a mixture of the two. We speak more than 100 languages in Sudan, but the main language is Arabic. So my mother tongue is Arabic, but my father speaks one of the 5 living Nubian languages. Unfortunately, I don't. Most of the Sudanese are Muslims. We have a considerable percentage of Christians and a considerable percentage of people who practice African traditional religions. So this is Sudan. And you will hear a lot of information about Sudan today, but there are a few things that I want you to walk out with. So the capital of Sudan is Khartoum, and Khartoum is literally, in Arabic, is the trunk. It's the elephant's trunk. So there are different theories of why it is called this Khartoum, but the importance of Khartoum is it's the city where the River Nile is born. So we have 3 Niles in Sudan. We have the Blue Nile that comes from Ethiopia. We have the White Nile that comes from Victoria Falls, Uganda, and Central Africa, and southern part of some Central African countries, and they both meet in Khartoum, and they form the River Nile. So the different branches of River Nile divide the city of Khartoum into 3 different cities. And you can see, well, we don't have in Sudan, and this is not an Arabic thing, but in Sudan we don't say black to to the color of people. We don't say black. We say blue or green. So if someone is very dark, we would say he's black or he's green. He's blue or he's green. So the Blue Nile actually means the black or the darker Nile, and it is so because of the thing that it carries from Ethiopia. The White Nile is lighter. The word Sudan, and this is common in many African countries, Sudan in Arabic means the land of the blacks. So Ard al-Sudan, the land of the blacks, which Ethiopia is also the land of the blacks in one language. Libya used to be the land of the blacks of another language, I think Greek. I mean, all the anyways. So this is one piece of information I want you to know. River Nile and the significance of River Nile in Sudan's life. It basically, this is the Blue Nile. This is the White Nile, they meet here in Khartoum and they continue, and the River Nile continues to Egypt. The other thing that I want you to remember, we are a very old country, and we have very, it's a beautiful country, first of all, and it's a very rich, Sudan is very rich in history and civilization. So we have the largest number of pyramids in the world, number-wise. They are much smaller than our neighbors in Egypt, but the significance of the civilizations of Sudan is Nubia. Nubia is in the southern part of Egypt and northern part of Sudan. This is where the old Egyptian civilization started. So the northern part of Sudan has the remains of these ancient civilizations and kingdoms: Kush, Karma, Meroe, Napta. So Kush is the land of the gold, I think, and it's an old name of Sudan, one of the oldest kingdoms in Sudan, and it is in the Bible. And the Black Pharaohs, so the concept of the Black Pharaohs, that actually in all the hieroglyphics and all the sculptures and everything, they are black, and they have the features of black people. So this is Sudan. I mean, this is the Nubian civilization. Some pictures, you will see some more in the slideshow. At one point, one of the Nubian kingdoms conquered Egypt and became the 25th dynasty of the Egyptian pharaohs. So this is also in the history. Fast forward with the adoption of Christianity, many Christian kingdoms were established in Sudan. Fast forward, and there are a lot of, I mean, also very rich in archaeology. Fast forward with the coming of Islam, some of the Christian kings converted to Islam, and the kingdoms became Muslim, but they continued living or coexisting, Muslims and Christians, until 1821, when Muhammad Ali of Egypt, or the Ottoman Empire, conquered Sudan, and that was the first time that Sudan as a political unity came to existence. He united the different kingdoms and states comprising Sudan, 1821. We'll talk about this later, I mean after 1820. So that's Sudan. I want you to remember the River Nile, it's a very diverse country, and it's very rich in history. The Sudanese telecom sector, there are four main service providers, telecom service providers. This is one of them, Sudatel or Sudani. This is the government-owned telecom company that was privatized in the early 90s, and it has operation, it has fixed as well as mobile services. The second one, and the largest, is Zain. Zain is the Sudanese unit of a Kuwaiti telecom group. It's based in Kuwait, and it holds 48% of the market share in Sudan. MTN is the Sudanese subsidiary of the South African telecom giant MTN. And then Kanar was established by the United Arab Emirates Etisalat, but later on was acquired by one of the Sudanese banks. Out of the 43 million people in Sudan, there are about 19.5 to 20 million unique mobile users. We have less than 160,000 fixed line users. Smartphone adoption rate is 38%. In sub-Saharan Africa, that's quite a high figure. About 10 million mobile broadband users, and the population coverage is 90%. We have 2G, 3G, and 4G LTE in Sudan. As in many cases, as common in that area, more than 95% of the total subscribers are prepaid, and internet represents about 20% of the total revenues. Telecom sector in Sudan is very important because this is one of the facts, that Zain, the Kuwaiti, the Kuwaiti company, brings about 14% of the direct foreign investments to Sudan. And also the contribution of the telecom sector to the Sudanese economy. Okay, so now we move in from Sudan to what happened in 2011 and why social media is important and why we witnessed the internet shutdown. So Arab Spring, this map, all the colored countries are the Arab countries in the Middle East and Africa. Most of them live under dictatorships and have been living under dictatorships for most of our modern history. For many reasons, young populations, frustrations, economic failures, a lot of reasons. There were unrests throughout the last decades in that region. But it reached a climax in December 2018 in Tunisia, which was supposedly one of the most open countries, but it was also very repressive, and people did not see how repressive the government is until very late. It was ruled by this guy, Zain al-Abidin Ben Ali, who took power in 1987 and remained the president until removed in January 2000. These are very wrong. So December 10, so 10, 11, 11, 11, 11, 11. So December 2010. Yeah. So December 2010, a guy whose name is Muhammad Bouazizi, out of a dispute with a local officer in a town in the southern part of Tunisia, burned himself to death. And that was the ignite of what became known as the Arab Spring. People resisted, people took out to the streets in Tunisia from the end of December 2010. By the end of, it was a period of like 3 to 4 weeks, and Zain al-Abidin Ben Ali fled the country, and that was the beginning of the Arab Spring. So social media played a role there in that. Those were the days of Facebook, where people used Facebook to circulate news, and news which is not covered by the public TV channels and media channels. It wasn't the case at that time yet, because satellite TV channels, which mostly are owned and operated by, in the Arab world, are operated by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. So you're familiar with Al Jazeera in Qatar, NBC and Al Arabiya in Saudi Arabia, and Sky News Arabia in United Arab Emirates, or owned by United Arab Emirates. So they are the influential TV channels that are controlling the media, what people hear and see. The Arab Spring took them by surprise, so they were not really sure what to do, so they continued 24-hour coverage of the Arab Spring. So social media did not play that big of a role in Tunisia as much as it did in Egypt. In Egypt, which took to the streets afterwards, this was a culmination of protests that started years before 2010 against, or 2011, against this guy, President Hosni Mubarak, who took office in 1980 and was removed in 2011, so 31 years. People were frustrated. Egypt had a population of 90+ million. It's the second or third largest country of population-wise in Africa. And here the social media played a big role, Twitter and Facebook. activists using Twitter, who are influentials, became the source of news and source of also informing people about what's happening, where it will happen, and how to organize. Facebook has wider followership, followers, and a few famous groups, Facebook pages, quickly gathered millions of members and followers, including one called Kulluna Khalid Saeed or something. So Khalid Saeed was a young man in Alexandria who was killed under torture, who was murdered under torture in the government's prisons. And people created this page just to show what happened, and this was one of the pages that became a magnet for people revolting against the government. 25th of January, people organized a big rally in the Maidan al-Tahrir Square, the center of Cairo. So two pictures of Maidan al-Tahrir. So this is Tunisia after the victory of the revolution. And a lot of things happened after the 25th of January. But finally, the armed forces, Hosni Mubarak actually appointed his deputy as a interim president and then went into exile in Sharm el-Sheikh or something. People continued, and that was the beginning of the roller coaster that happened in Egypt from 2011 and that we're seeing until today. But because of the role that that Facebook and Twitter played, the Egyptian government, which is very militarized, and the armed forces, the military and the security and intelligence agencies in Egypt are very strong. Historically are very strong and among the strongest in that region. They simply decided to shut down the internet, and they did this when all the people were in Maidan al-Tahrir Square. And this trend continued. So they tried to do this to suppress the news. It was too much for them. The news was, Egypt is not Sudan, so you cannot hide what was happening in Egypt. So this failed. But a famous quote was, so one of the factors that led to this revolution is Hosni Mubarak becoming as old as he was at that time, started preparing his son to succeed him, to become the next president. And I think it was his son, who was jokingly saying that, those are a few kids with Facebook who want to overthrow the government. So, which it happened. So, afterwards, Yemen, Syria, they are still going through this very difficult Arab Spring. It's not an Arab Spring anymore, but they were the next in line. Libya also. So this is the Libyan president who was killed at the end of the revolution there, but the country is still has not recovered. This is the president of Yemen, and this is the president of Syria. Three examples, not yet. But we've seen also smaller versions of the Arab Spring in most of the other countries. Bahrain was a famous one, and the Saudi forces crossed the bridge from from Saudi Arabia to Bahrain to crack the demonstrators there. But we've seen in other examples in Jordan, in Oman, and in Morocco, Algeria, a few smaller ones in Sudan at a later stage. But yeah, this is the Arab Spring. It's, needless to say, the United Nations in Human Rights Council in 2016 stated that they condemned unequivocally measures to intentionally prevent or disrupt access to or dissemination of information online in violation of international human rights law, and calls on all states to refrain from and seize such measures. Despite all these good intentions, we have been seeing an increase in governments shutting down the internet. From 2011, when people saw the effectiveness of this during the Arab Spring, till in 2018, 188 incidents of governments shutting down the internet. So it can be partial or total. So total internet shutdown is called blackout. This is an example, is what happened in Sudan. And then partial is when you block either social media or block HTTPS as an example, or you block VPN access, or so you don't block all the internet flow, but you block parts of it. And it's, of course, intentional disruption. So this is the definition of internet or electronic communications, rendering them inaccessible or effectively unusable for a specific population or within a location, often to exert control over the flow of information. And I said it's basically the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, because these are from 2016 to 2018. These are the countries with the highest number of internet shutdowns. Surprisingly, the largest democracy on earth, India, is responsible for the largest number of internet shutdowns. In 2 years and 4 months, the government of India shut down the internet 154 times. And these usually, so what governments, and the second one is Pakistan, the neighbor of India. So India and Pakistan, no, India and Pakistan, this is Iran. Iran should be somewhere here. India and Pakistan, because of the tensions between the two countries, but the governments usually would not declare that there is an internet shutdown. First of all, I mean, if you are in places like India, when you can, the country is divided into telecom regions in such a way where you can basically be in a state and you don't know that another state is experiencing an internet shutdown. Usually, the countries would cite reasons like national security or public order or whatever. In the strange case of Ethiopia, they shut down the internet during the secondary school certificate examinations every year for, the fear of leaking the exams papers. So, but whether that's the real reason or not, we don't know. But in all these cases, in India, as an example, one of the longest internet shutdowns happened in Kashmir, which is a disputed area between India and Pakistan, for more than 200 days, I think, 133 days. And in another part of India, West Bengal, there was 100 days of internet shutdown in 2017. There are other countries and regions where, in Cameroon, because of some public unrest, there was an internet shutdown. Togo, an internet shutdown. Chad has a very long, I think, more than 1 year of internet shutdown. And then you would find places like Bali in Indonesia, a resort basically, shutting the internet frequently during certain holidays for fear of terrorist attacks or whatever, but they do it. So, yeah. We see, so here you can see India, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Iran, Chad, and Egypt. People are fighting. So I said that there is an internet blackout and a partial internet shutdowns. And this partial internet shutdown, well, in the region, it is very common in various ways. So if you live in the Middle East, in any of the Middle East countries, you are most likely, your internet traffic is monitored. There are lawful interception laws that regulate what sort of access the government or the police authorities have on they have to get basically a license or a permit to basically spy on you or to gain access on your traffic, but this is usually done without the need to get this access or this permit. Various applications are blocked. In most of the Gulf countries, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, VoIP applications are not allowed. This has two main reasons. One, security and safety reason. Well, basically the governments don't want, they basically want to be able to access and hear and listen and see any traffic that is going on in the country.
Voice over IP?
Voice over IP,
Okay.
yes, voice over IP. So things as easy as WhatsApp calls are not allowed in those countries. Skype calls are not allowed in many of these countries. People use VPN, but it is punishable by law, and it is punishable by a huge fine and by, I think, even some prison terms in many of these countries. And we're talking about the most advanced of them. I lived in the United Arab Emirates. It's a beautiful country, but it has some of the most the stringest regulations on this. Working in the telecom industry in that region is very difficult when it comes to dealing with security, the security regulations. The cloud is as a concept, they all know that they have to be in the cloud and host data on the cloud, but because of the security regulations, they cannot do that. They need to see or to have all the data emerging from or in the country within the borders of each of these countries. And this allows them to have censorship. So in many of these countries, there are websites that you cannot access, and the number of websites is increasing by the day. It can be anything. So really, some religious content is not allowed, some political content is not allowed, and the list goes on.
What about Tor?
What's that?
What about Tor? The onion router? Like
Yes.
Using that, I assume that's the same as using VPN. It's forbidden.
Exactly. It is forbidden. It is forbidden. So people, it's a chicken and egg thing. People try, and there are very tech savvy people there. So they try things. The authorities learn how to defend them, and then they do it again.
So does that explain why there are no AWS regions anywhere in Africa?
AWS, Amazon. So Africa is not, the funny thing is most African countries are more open to this than the Middle East. So I'm talking about here, the Middle East. The Middle East is, they have the resources, they have the money, and they have the, they talk with all these big companies are located in Dubai. So you have Google, you have Facebook, Twitter, all of them are in Dubai or in Bahrain or in any of these countries or in Qatar even. So there isn't much that they can do. So AWS, they basically have to adapt to what the governments tell them to do. I'll give an example. When BlackBerry was a thing, 2009, 2010, 3 or 4 of the governments of the region actually, and I think threatened BlackBerry to cut the services of BlackBerry if they don't host their servers in those countries. I think United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, and India, I think. And basically, they gave them an ultimatum of if you don't do this, we'll cut the services. And at that time, BlackBerry was the enterprise and the business community means of communication.
Yeah, but at about that time, the CIA hacked the BlackBerry OS and was using them as listening devices.
Yes, yes, yes. And mysteriously, this threat cooled down. No one knows what happened. What we think happened is basically BlackBerry abided to them and hosted some of their servers in those countries. Yes. So the fact that, well, the BlackBerry has positioned itself as unhackable and came under test back in 2009 and 2010 in those countries. And it's not the CIA. I mean, even so, yeah, the CIA, yes, but it's a small country. You can't see it in some of these countries. You can't see them in the map, but they dictate to BlackBerry what to do, and they do the same to the Googles and the Facebooks and Twitters of the world.
Well, so in the Middle East, though, it's just because these governments are hugely authoritarian and controlling. So, I mean, some of the countries you mentioned, Dubai and United Arab Emirates, those are very wealthy
Yes.
countries, but the government control is so strict that you still see the suppression of communications there because of the government imposed restrictions.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
Africa, and I don't know, I've never been, you tell me, I mean, Africa, it seems more like there's not as much infrastructure because there's not as much wealth as there is in the Middle East.
Yes, true. So if it were for many of the African countries, they would do the same as the wealthy countries of the Middle East do right now. The thing is, they don't have the means to do it. So the list, probably you've seen The Big Hack, right? The documentary. What is The Big Hack or The Great Hack? The Great Hack. Yeah. If you there is one, and I think I took a picture of that because we were asking whether Sudan was a customer of Analytica, Cambridge Analytica, and it was one of the countries. So and let me, I think I have the photo of the map of. No, I don't have it. The map of the countries who've been customers to Cambridge Analytica, and many African countries were. So if they have the money, then they do like the other wealthy countries do. But they simply, some of them don't have the resources. But the wealthy ones do. And so you have two types. Either the wealthy ones are either wealth, or in places like Iran, where if you don't have the money, you have the manpower to do what you want. So Iran is very advanced in research and development and technology. So they have their own things. And one surprising thing that I'm not sure if any one of you noticed, that we don't see Russia or China here. You would expect that Russia and China, but simply, I mean, Russia and China have their own stuff, so they don't need to shut the internet to switch off or to block their citizens from using WhatsApp. There is no WhatsApp in China.
Well, they just have filtering, extreme filtering, not outages, just filtering.
Exactly. So that's the other type. Yes, true. So yes.
So why are they different? Why do Russia and China do filtering and these countries just shut everything down?
Well, they have the means. Russia and China, they have the means. And again, Russia and China, well, I mean, China would tell Google what to do, and they will finally do what China wants them to do. So they filter out what words, what terms you can search in China, and they remove the results that they don't like, and Google has to do this for them. So regardless of what they say, but this is the truth, So in Russia and China, they have the means, the technical will and power and might of doing what they can do or what they need to do this is at the end is, and we will see at the end of the internet shutdown in Sudan how effective that internet shutdown was. They are not usually that effective. You would shut down a whole country. I mean, in Sudan, the shutdown lasted for 37 days. But people, succeeded in organizing a bigger rally than the ones they organized before the internet shut down, and they had nothing to basically to organize with. The internet was down. So the effectiveness of this is, I mean, maybe China and Russia are not as they have their own ways definitely to do it. Yes.
I would almost go as far as to say that the surveillance capacity is so substantial that to cut that off entirely, they would do themselves a disservice.
Right.
And that's true even for the United States with our intelligence community.
Yes.
True. Exactly. Yeah. And this is, yes, this is very, very evident in the use of VPNs as an example. So when in many of these examples, many of these countries, and we've seen this in Sudan as well, you would see messages from people that, okay, use this VPN and use that VPN, and at the end of the day, you don't know where this VPN traffic is going, and it was used. In Sudan, there was a very specific use case that I'll tell you about that had this impact, and I'll talk about it in a bit. So yes.
Just a quick question about that, because you mentioned the VPN. So in Russia, you can get a license to provide VPN services, which basically means it's VPN to everybody but the government.
Yeah.
What about Sudan? Or the other countries? Do they have a licensing regime for VPNs?
No. So basically, VPN it's beyond their regulatory framework. So they can do nothing about it. So when the latest internet when the revolution started in December, there was a partial shutdown where they blocked the social media in Sudan. And this is very common in many other parts as well. So everyone, and I worked in a telecom operator in Sudan, everyone, including the employees and the executives of all the mobile companies in Sudan, used the VPN. And it was an open secret that you can use whatever VPN to access the same social media websites that are blocked. But again, some of them had were not safe, and people were very aware that some of them were spread by the government and used by the government to spy on the organizers and the activists. So we stopped in 1821 Sudan history when Muhammad Ali Pasha, Egypt and Ottoman Empire conquered Sudan for 60 years. Then a nationalist government revolution started, the Mahdi, and they fought. They gained independence in 1885. We became an independent country until 1898, when the British reconquered Sudan with the Egyptian troops, and we became under the Anglo-Egyptian rule from 1896 until 1956, when we gained our independence. So in 1956, the 1st of January 1956, Sudan became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain its independence. And it was a democracy, a functioning democracy. Sudan was pretty advanced when you compare it to some of its neighbors in Africa. We had a very good educational system, very strong universities, very efficient civil service, and we had a functioning democracy. It's a very diverse country, and you have to have democracy to rule it. So in 1956 we gained independence, but this wasn't common in our neighborhood. the Middle East, many of the other Middle Eastern countries were not functioning democracies, apart from Lebanon, I think. Lebanon was the only exception, but most of the others were governed by kings, by sheikhs, by emirs, or by dictators, military dictators. But 1958, so this is the story of Sudan. 1958, there was a coup d'etat, and the military took the government. They remained in power for 6 years. Then a popular uprising or popular revolution in October 1964. So this is far precedes the Arab Spring. They toppled the military regime. They gained again, there was a parliamentary democracy in 1964, 5 years, and then another general took office, took the power in 1969. He governed Sudan for 16 years, moving all the way from the far left to the far right in the process during the 16 years. And then another uprising, popular uprising, happened in 1985. We gained, so this is the 1964, October 1964 revolution, and this is 1985 Intifada. It was called Intifada before the Palestinian Intifada. Intifada in Arabic is uprising. They governed, a democratic government ruled the country for 4 years, and then General Omar al-Bashir took the office in 1989. Extremist, terrorist, human rights abuser, all the bad things that you can think of a leader were in Omar al-Bashir. People started resisting his government from day one, but he continued suppressing them, killing hundreds of thousands in the process, killing people in the different civil wars in Sudan, in the south, in the west, in the north, torturing political opposition leaders and trade unionists and students, engaging in international terrorism, attempting to kill Hosni Mubarak, the president of Egypt, in 1995, housing Osama bin Laden and many terrorist organizations in Sudan, and finally committing genocide in places like Darfur, the western part of Sudan. And he continued killing and suppressing all the attempts of the people to organize and to get rid of him, which literally started from day one. The most in Khartoum, because Sudan is a big country and the telecommunication, we could see that it's mainly mobile, but mobile communications were introduced in the country in 1998. So fixed telecommunication wasn't that big. So you can basically be in a part of the country where you know nothing about what's happening in other parts. And this is one of the tactics that they used in places. I was in the telecom operator when we started rolling out the network, the mobile network. So when you roll out the mobile network for a country as large as Sudan with a dispersed people, you would start by the main cities. So you would have BTS's, base transmission, base transceiver station. This is the radio station that basically connects you to the network. You would install a few base stations in some of these big cities in the country. You will not cover the highways, as an example, or the remote areas. When we were in the operations team in the company, we would know that there was a massacre that was going to happen, or there was an activity by the military or the security forces when, for no reason, the transmission is cut from one of these cities, usually in the south or in the west. So that was one way of internet shutdown. It wasn't internet shutdown, it was basically telecommunication shutdown. So they would basically, it's as simple as just plugging a cable from the tower, and you isolate the city and the surrounding, or the town and the surrounding areas. So they were doing this, and committing whatever atrocities that they wanted. So the opposition and the resistance to the government continued. Many people lost their lives. The strongest that we remember was in 2013, where something similar to this happened. People took out to the street in the capital. So they can kill whomever they want in the West, because we have no means to know what happens there. But when they start killing people in the capital, in Khartoum, that's when everyone knows. So they killed more than 200 people, or almost 200 people in less than a week. And most of them were young boys and girls. But after 2013, after this September 2013, the government was able to put the resistance for a while, until December 2018. So people, like regularly, every few months, they would go out to the street, take out to the streets. But in 2018, December, all of a sudden, some dispersed demonstrations happened in these parts of Sudan, in very remote areas, actually, not in the capital. It started so this is the capital. It started here in Damazin, along the Blue Nile. No one knew, no one heard about it. And then one day after, it happened in Atbara. Atbara is a very important city in North Sudan. This is where the headquarters of the Sudan Railways is, and it is a very labor, a very trade unionist city. Another demonstrations happened here, and then the government killed some of the protesters. Then in another city in the east. So all this was between the 13th and the 18th or 19th of December. Then this thing here, the Sudanese Professionals Association, which is an umbrella group of trade unions, of Sudanese professional bodies that groups doctors, engineers, journalists, lawyers, teachers, that it was functioning under the ground for the past 3 or 4 years. But in 2000, so after the demonstrations in those cities, they decided that they called for mass demonstrations in Khartoum on the 25th of December. And they were calling for basically increasing the minimum wage. But then when just a few days before the 25th of December, they decided that no, it's not, they will not call for increasing the minimum wage. They will actually call for the president to step down. And this was the 25th of December demonstration, one of the pictures of that. It was a small one. No one really had any idea that, and as a Sudanese, in the last few years, I started not to put so much hope in any of these things, because usually after a few months or a few weeks, it gets crushed. But it continued. And this, the Sudanese Professionals Association, was effective in being decentralized. No one knew the real leadership of the Sudanese Professionals Association. The government of the security forces tried to arrest and did arrest some of the leaders, but it continued operating under the ground. And it continued operating so they created a Facebook page, I don't know exactly when it was created, but all of a sudden, this Facebook page became the go-to place to get organized. Then a few days, so they organized the 25th of December demonstration. This is the center of Khartoum. They organized another one on the 31st of December. And then the 1st of January, this is called the Declaration of Freedom and Change. It was declared grouping the Sudanese Professionals Association with the political parties. Different political parties in the opposition, they joined hand and they created the forces of the Declaration of Freedom and Change. And how they organized these demonstrations? Simply by the Facebook page, a Twitter account, but Twitter is not spread as Facebook in Sudan. And what they started doing is they started announcing marches. So this is a typical thing that would appear in the Facebook page, that we will have a march on the 17th of March, and in this city, Omdurman, the twin city of the capital Khartoum, this is the map, and people should move from here to there. So this started, we started seeing this in January. This is the time when they shut the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. WhatsApp is important, and I'll talk about it in a bit. But people used VPN, to access this. The demonstrations kept increasing, and people started to gain confidence. Many people died. So throughout the first 5 months of the demonstration, I think around 70 or 80 people died. Most of them are young and less than 25 years old. But WhatsApp played a very important role in, first of all, I mean, this is so SMS is there, but WhatsApp is free almost. So we're using WhatsApp in like, this is how we have groups, family groups, friends groups, work groups, and whatever. So people are using WhatsApp, but the important element of WhatsApp is, this is where the organizers meet. So the Sudanese Professional Association, the different bodies of the Sudanese Professional Association, including my body, the engineers, the Sudanese Engineers Syndicate, would have different WhatsApp groups, grouping people inside Sudan and outside Sudan. And the people outside Sudan played a big role in helping the revolution in Sudan. So people started contributing money and doing a lot of things to help people inside Sudan, and doing things like treating those who get injured, paying money, and supporting those whose family, I mean, the families of those who were murdered, and helped in the organization and overall coordination of what was happening in Sudan at that time. And mind you, this started in December, but literally no one in the world knew that this was happening in Sudan. There was no media coverage of what was happening in Sudan until the 6th of April. Or the 11th of April, where I'll come to it. But this is, people use WhatsApp. What I want to say, people use WhatsApp. And for those who have some doubts about WhatsApp, people started using Signal and Telegram. So that's when you, when if you are doing something really serious and you don't want to get caught, people would use Signal and Telegram. But the government, by catching one person and having access to their phone, they can identify a whole network of people and they arrest them. But people continued marching on the streets. So this continued from December, January, until the 6th of April. 6th of April is the anniversary of the Intifada that toppled the dictator Nimeri in 1985. So what the Sudanese Professionals Association and the Forces of Declaration of Freedom and Change decided, they started announcing a weekly schedule of marches and activities, revolutionary activities, and people would abide by them. They would just follow them. That at 1 p.m. there would be a demonstration at this certain place, and people would gather regardless, and they would start under the tear gas, under the brutality of police and security, and they would start chanting and marching. But before the 6th of April, they for the first time they declared a 2-week revolutionary agenda or schedule that ended on the 6th of April. And they made the 6th of April not very clear what they want to do, but they asked people to be ready to march. We know from Egypt that there was the Tahrir Square, where people gathered in a Tahrir Square. We don't have a place as big as Tahrir Square in Khartoum. But on the 6th of April, they did everything underground. They did a magnificent job in organizing. And then they called all the different marches in different cities, not only in the capital, to go and gather in front of the military headquarters. So in the Khartoum, in the capital, in front of the military headquarters, in the other cities, in front of the regional military bases. And of course, this couldn't have happened without coordinating somehow with some good military officers. But they gathered along the military, so this is the military headquarters compound. It's a huge compound in the middle of Khartoum, like 500 meters away from the River Nile. It's very close to the Khartoum airport. And all of a sudden, we have our sit-in. On the 6th of April, there was a sit-in in front of the military headquarters that had hundreds of thousands of people. And this is in a place where the whole military and police were actually trying to prevent this. What we know that the president at that time, from the 6th of April until the 11th of April, he was weighing and he was discussing with his commanders to kill as much as a third of the people to get rid of this. He knew that this could not, his rule could not continue if they stay. But so history will tell whether his commanders really wanted to save lives or wanted the power to themselves. On the 11th of April, 5 days after the sit-in, they removed the president. So he was toppled, he was substituted by his deputy. The people continued the sit-in. They knew that they didn't want to change a dictator by another dictator. So that guy resigned in 2 days, and something called the Transitional Military Council took the power and became the de facto government of the country. This was on the 13th of April. And started negotiating with the Sudanese Professional Association and the forces of Declaration of Freedom and Change. But people stayed in the city, in the perimeters of the military headquarters from the 6th of April until June the 3rd. Negotiations continued up and down, reaching an agreement, and then killings continued. There were very memorable pictures, like I said earlier, the city of Atbara, the headquarters of the Sudan Railways, when they sent a train, and Sudan, the railways are not functioning anymore, but they surprised everyone by sending a train full of supporters to the city to join those who are in the city of Khartoum. And many people started romanticizing what was happening in the city. Literally, I mean, with the paintings, with the way people supporting each other, and they created a country, a state, or a system, a community with no an ideal, an idealistic community, I would say, where things like one of the chants that we observed at the beginning, that if you don't have money, take. If you have, put. So they like big, I don't know, boxes where if you need money, you get the money. If you have money, you contribute. And this is how, yeah. So things like this, people sharing, people organizing and providing the security to allow people to access the sit-in and leave the sit-in, and doing it in a very polite way. Usually when you have such a number of people, males and females, you would assume that there are like cases of sexual harassment and stuff. No, not a single case was witnessed at that time, and people. Anyways, it was an idealistic, and I have to say that people saw this in Egypt, even in Maidan al-Tahrir, Tahrir Square. A lot of documentaries and movies came out afterwards, and but anyways. So this continued, the negotiations continued, and people started to feel freedom in Sudan for the first time in 30 years. I didn't put his picture, but Omar al-Bashir ruled Sudan for 30 years before falling. So people started to see the Sudan they want to see in the sit-in. The 3rd of June, the Transitional Military Council, I was in Sudan and I was in this place. I visited Sudan and I spent 2 days, basically almost half of them in the sit-in area. And I left Sudan on the 31st of May, the night of 31st of May. The early morning hours of the 3rd of June, the last day of Ramadan, which is our holy month, the Transitional Military Council and forces decided to disperse the sit-in, killing in the process more than 120 people. And then just like changing the whole narrative of what was happening in Sudan since the 11th of April, and doing atrocities, literally killing people, cases of rape for men and women, killing people and throwing their bodies in the River Nile, killing and throwing bodies after tying blocks to their bodies so that they don't surface, and then raiding houses across the city for 3 or 4 for almost a week. The city was something very different, and that was the time. So they did this, and at the same time, so this started in the early hours of the 3rd of June. They cut the internet in Sudan. So that's the internet shutdown that happened in Sudan, and how they did it.
What's the pink smoke in the middle with the banners?
Yeah, so this is celebratory. So they are celebrating. So this is tear gas. This is tear gas. Oh, this is not actually. These are fires. So they burned the ruling party's buildings. But you would see in some. No, I think this is not a tear gas. So this is like people like smoke, colored smoke. Yeah. But a lot of tear gas was used during the demonstration. Yeah. So how they did it? So I said during September 2013 there was an internet shutdown. That was the largest thing. Then in December 2018, at the beginning of the revolution, there was a social media shutdown, and then June the 3rd, total internet shutdown during the dispersal of the sit-in. How this happened? The regulatory body, Telecom and Post Regulatory Authority, TRPA, basically ordered the telecom operators to shut down the internet, the mobile internet. And how they did this, so either by calls, they called them, or they usually you don't have written orders in these, but you know that if you are a CEO and you get the call that you have to do this. So I know very brave engineers who tried to resist this, but they had to abide at the end. So what they did, how they did it is basically they reconfigured the access point names, the APNs of the accessing the internet, and barred the ones that are used by the subscribers. So at a matter of less than 2 hours, all the, and there are more than 99% of the internet access in Sudan is via mobile broadband, mobile internet. So people became disconnected. So all mobile internet was offline, except inbound roaming. So inbound roamers were still able to access, and this continued until the 30th of June. I'll talk about it in a bit. But fixed lines, some fixed lines, one of the two fixed line operators were allowed to operate, because you cannot be in 2019 and don't have internet access. So they allowed banks and the airports and the airlines and stuff to operate using the fixed lines, fiber fixed line and DSL, but very limited. In a country of 43 million people, only 10,000 lines were online. Voice and SMS were available, but the main thing was the mobile internet. What this meant is, complete disconnection from the internet and lack of access to information socially. This is for citizens and customers. So I used to call my parents every couple of days, and I would use WhatsApp to call them. I wasn't able to do that for 37 days. So and it's usually expensive to call international calls. But this meant that you were actually breaking the networks, the social networks, and economic impact, of course. You have people who rely on, we have the Uber-like apps, so these were trying to quantify some of the economic impacts for citizens. Like 30,000 drivers using Uber-like apps and losing $15 million US per month, 40,000 mobile points of sales, so 600,000 US dollars. Loss of mobile internet service, which is, this is for the service providers, 20% of revenues for the service providers, and then the brand and legal challenges to the mobile service providers. For local businesses, of course, you're cut of everything. And we had a cash scarcity problem, so people were using the apps and electronic means of transferring and transactioning, doing their daily transactions. They were not able to do so. And mind you, Sudan has been under US embargo since 1995, I think. So although the embargo was lifted in 2017 or 2017, October 2017, but still, as a country, we're not allowed to use, American companies are not allowed to operate in Sudan. So Microsoft, Facebook, everything, they are not allowed to operate. IBM, yeah, so you're not allowed to buy or to operate or sell or anything in Sudan. So you're not allowed to use Visa or MasterCard, so we don't have the credit card system that you have here, so people have their own homegrown applications and means to do that. The embargo has been lifted, but the companies are still slow in opening up. But that is important because, yeah, for local banks, they are using their own applications. The important thing was for organizers and activists and media, and here is what, getting back to your point, is they managed to cut the networks of the organizers and the leaders of the revolution. Of course, after the 11th of April, those who were arrested were freed, and they started publicly appearing and organizing and leading the activities. But they were now under the full, they were almost naked in front of the security apparatus, right? So now the security forces knew their mobile numbers, they knew their whereabouts, their safe houses, everything about them, what happened in the 2 months after the 11th of April. Some of the measures that they used before that, they were using like for WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is easier to hack, and easier to intercept. They used WhatsApp numbers, international WhatsApp numbers, and this was one of the things the Sudanese in diaspora helped in Sudan. So you would get American numbers or European numbers and send them and activate WhatsApp on them and send them. So some of the leaders and activists and organizers were having these international WhatsApp numbers, but they literally cut the communications between the bodies that were leading the revolution, and that was a very hard time for everyone. Of course, the psychological effect of the massacre was huge on all the Sudanese people, but the fact that people were not able to communicate was very, very hard. The government really did not care about it. I mean, losing the tax revenue is nothing for them, so they did not really care. But the most important thing is by that internet shutdown, that the forces were able to execute the massacre and commit other atrocities with no one knowing what was happening.
Well, so why did the government allow the people to celebrate this victory for 5 or 6 weeks before they then changed their mind?
Preparing to, I mean, this is what happened in the Arab Spring. So well, history will tell, but like in Egypt, so the example of Egypt, the revolution started on the 25th of January, and Hosni Mubarak stepped down in mid-February. The military took the power and they started negotiating with people. Then democratic elections was held in a year time that led to the Muslim Brotherhood taking power, being president. But the region, the powers of the region, after they gathered, they were taken by surprise by what happened in the Arab Spring, especially in Egypt. And that's why I said, like, even the TV channels were basically broadcasting everything that was happening. But afterwards, they started organizing and coming with tactics to oppose this, to basically put a break on the Arab Spring and on the democratic transformation. So in Egypt, they started supporting the guy who took over the power afterwards, Sisi, 2 years after the revolution, the Arab Spring in Egypt. So 2011, 2013, Al-Sisi orchestrated what people now agree that was a coup, and he took power. And they started doing this. So they needed time to organize the regional powers and those who, because the powers in those countries are still with the military and the security forces. So in Sudan, in Sudan, it seems that this is what was happening, and the same powers were doing this. So they were taken by surprise. This was their guy. He's important. Al-Bashir as a dictator is important to the region's powers because he's running a bankrupt country. He's corrupt. He is basically selling Sudanese soldiers and kids to fight in the war in Yemen with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates for money. So mercenaries in Yemen. So this was for the regional powers. He was their man, but they didn't very much like him. So they were fine with him going away, but everyone wants to ensure that another man of theirs taking power. So
So
many
something
people.
rises to fill the vacuum.
Exactly. So the 5 weeks were a time when a game, a power sharing game where whether you, everyone was playing. It's all the countries in the region. The strong man in Sudan now is not the president of the Transitional Military Council. It's actually his deputy, who's an uneducated militia leader who was in charge of human massacres and genocide in Darfur. So by that record, he's not supposed to be in any democratic transitional regime, right? But he is, this guy, the number 2, this militia leader, is supported by United Arab Emirates, by Saudi Arabia, by Egypt, by the European Union, because he was part of something called the Khartoum process, where the European Union paid money to him and to the Sudanese government to block the migration routes of illegal immigration from Africa to Libya and then to the Mediterranean, to Europe. So this guy, although he's a militia leader and he's known, I mean, his atrocities in Darfur are well documented, but they were paying millions of dollars per month to him. And he became at one point a state within the state. The United States, there is a great support to the Sudan. So everything about the Sudanese revolution that no one was aware of until April, it became very well known after April. It was in all news after the sit-in, of course. So people were more aware of what was happening, and there is great support to Sudan across the lines. I mean, across the political establishment in the United States. But when you go up the State Department and the presidency, they follow what Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates say about Sudan.
Also, the Western powers are paying him off to stop political refugees from infusing Europe and
Exactly.
US.
Yes. So, and they just turn a blind eye to the fact that he killed tens of
But he was
thousands
part
of
of
people in
Darfur.
Darfur. Yeah. They because of the widespread of what happened after the revolution, the European Union found it very difficult to keep supporting him. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, they announced that they are stopping the Khartoum process. So they are stopping giving money to him. But they support. This guy controls an area of Sudan that is the size, we always say Darfur is the size of France. So he's the state in Darfur. He controls mountains of gold, mines of gold. The state has no access to what he is doing. And he's shipping kids, soldiers, you call them child soldiers to Yemen to fight on behalf of Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates in the war in Yemen.
So the refugees, they're not necessarily coming from Syria.
No, the refugees that are crossing to Europe, there are some that come from Syria through Turkey and the Mediterranean, but those who are in Sudan is a path of refugees, or actually migrants or illegal migrants for other countries of Africa. So people would come from Eritrea, Ethiopia, or Niger, Chad, and Central African Republic. They cross Sudan and they go to. So this can be seen in the map here. So this is Darfur. So this part is Darfur. This is where this guy is. The guy is controlling this part. So it has this borders with Libya, and of course this part of Egypt is uninhabited. So people would cross from Eritrea or Ethiopia or the other African countries through Darfur, and they would go to Libya. There is no state in Libya for the past 8 years, and then they would cross the Mediterranean to these Italian islands. So yeah, they were paying him money to keep this illegal, and of course, I mean, by keeping he's not like hosting them in hotels, right? So, yeah.
Well, I mean, the U.S. actually has a long history of doing that in South America, propping up some despot as a puppet.
Yes.
That's actually, you know, a nasty son of a bitch, and eventually we had to jail Noriega, but
Yes.
when he quit playing ball, right?
Yes, true.
But it's a pattern that's repeated since
True.
the early 1900s.
True.
But I didn't know that the European Union, you know, I've never been over there.
Yeah.
So it's the same game?
Exactly. Yeah. After all, I mean, after what happened after Gaddafi fell, and he was killed, people started reading stories about the money he used to contribute to intervene within the Italian and French politics and stuff. So and they were happy to get his money. So we reached the last part of the. Thank you very much for keeping up with me. But this is the last part of what I'm saying. So with this internet shutdown, what people tried to do, different people tried different things to try to keep this, to keep the flow of information in and out of Sudan. So one thing was APN leakage. We said that the way that they controlled, they shut down the internet is by changing the configuration of the APNs. So very brave men and women inside the mobile operators actually reconfigured some of the new APNs. There were some APNs allowed for some stuff, of course. So some brave men and women configured APNs to a limited number of people, including some of the leaders of the revolution and the resistance. But again, this put them under first of all, their personal safety. Because throughout during the last few weeks of the revolution in May and June, people organized general strikes in the country and civil disobedience for a few days. 3 days of civil disobedience and 2 days of full, almost total general strike. The military authorities murdered one of the employees of the Civil Aviation Authority because simply by striking they blocked the airway. I mean they blocked the Khartoum airport, international airport. So they sent a message to everyone that there are a few things that we will not allow. So they went to his house, they killed him to make sure that those who work in the airport don't go to strike. I mean, don't continue the strike. So this happened, but again, there was the risk of this is becoming a very limited internet traffic, and it was very easy for the authorities to know. And I think at one point the security authorities used this to identify where the leaders were hiding and where they were conducting their own business. But it started as a very brave thing from those, and it was blocked after a few weeks. So the internet shutdown continued for 37 days. This continued, I think, for 2 weeks, but then afterwards it was completely blocked. The bulk SMS, that is a very one of the most successful means. Basically sending SMSs on bulk using some service providers and with certain messages. So you would send things like there is a demonstration tomorrow in that place, and you would send this to certain numbers. So a few challenges here. First of all, this is costly. Second of all, most mobile operators have something called the anti-spam for the SMS, and they can basically block, they can filter many things, and they block these messages. And a very important thing, and we've seen it also in Sudan, that you can hack it. You can, because I can send something, but the security can send another message, and you won't be able, as a normal person, a subscriber, you won't know who's sending this message. And then, of course, finding the database of numbers. But at least this was something that was measurable. So we knew exactly how many messages were sent, how many were received. But it was under, like, I mean, it came with these challenges. International data roaming, so people started buying in bulk SIM cards from with international roaming activated from neighboring countries. So Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Kenya, whatever, and then sending them inside Sudan and to be used by certain people. So this was very costly, because to activate data roaming, usually in our part of the world, in that part of the world, is expensive, but it was effective. So it was at one point one of the very few ways of the leadership of the protesters to communicate together. But the government went as far as blocking all international data roaming, regardless. I mean, and in spite of the regulations and the agreements between the mobile operators and the international operators. They did this on the 30th of June, when they realized that, well, people are using this, they blocked the international data roaming. So, and this goes for everyone. This went for everyone who was in Sudan at that time.
But that sparked no response from the UN.
It's not the UN,
Well, it's a violation of the human rights.
Of course, everything here is a violation of
But
course.
nobody did it.
Of course.
Oh, well, it's not us.
Of course.
Don't worry about it.
No, everything here is, yeah. Satellite, using satellite solutions, but this is costly, very costly. So you would get phones connected to satellite service providers, but these are usually very limited in the bandwidth and very costly. Again, the data charges for satellite networks are very expensive. Local APN. So this is a solution that people tried. So this is, in theory, this was something that could work, but I don't think that I'm not aware of that it was put in place. But basically, configuring a private APN, because you need, but the difficulty here is you need, first of all, to have an internet source. So you need fiber or DSL or satellite, and then you relay this internet to others. But you need to configure a private APN, and this private APN comes from the mobile operators who are banned by the government from providing this service. Wi-Fi extension, this was used where we said that fiber and DSL were fixed lines. I mean, fixed line data was online or was on. So people started people who with fixed data lines started extending their Wi-Fi connections. So there would be hotspots in certain areas. So if there is a center or a company or an office with fiber or DSL, or houses with DSL, they would basically open their Wi-Fi so you can use it without a password or without a password. But they started doing this to groups. So you would do it for your neighbors, you would do it and you would tell people that there is this place with Wi-Fi connection if you want to upload some materials or stuff. But it's working or a practical solution, but it has some challenges. It's very short range.
It's easy to
and
detect.
it's easy to detect. Yeah. and limited access. You can't have 100 people connecting to one Wi-Fi. This was a promising thing, and it was used in Hong Kong and in Venezuela, the mesh networks, like the Fire Chat app. It could work in a country like Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is very densely populated city. Khartoum is not as dense as Hong Kong, and it required people to have the application and the app and to be aware of the app, which wasn't possible at that time because no one was ready to do this. But basically the Fire Chat or the mesh networks is you have this app and then you use Bluetooth to connect from one to another. So I connect to you if we are within range, and your connection becomes the connection of her, and you build this network, this mesh network. So this is, again, in theory, is a working solution. In the case of Sudan, maybe people should be ready and download the application now, but it will have the limitations of the distance. This is a very, the dial-up access. If you are as old as me and you remember the first days of the internet, you would remember that we would connect to the internet using dial-up modems and that sound of modem. So actually it's still there today. You could use the bandwidth, the voice bandwidth, to dial up to a modem somewhere and use this limited bandwidth of voice to transmit data. But first of all, this is a very low bandwidth, so most likely you will not be able to send or to upload or download videos, maybe pictures or images. It requires some work. There is a cost to make this workable. You need to, because you can set up a server to connect you to the internet inside Sudan, but this would be detected the second day. So the best way to do it is to connect to somewhere outside, and that's why every connection would be an international call. So you will need, this will mean some cost in doing this. And it requires the app development. But this is a very promising thing. If this, so I know that it was tested and it worked in transmitting some data, but I think it requires, it needs some time to become a functioning solution. Mainly to, I think there were like, even when people were considering this, they found some companies that did something like this during the Egyptian revolution. And where they offered free international calls, so free numbers that you can call to. But again, this is something that was worth checking. Of course, we have the thing that I represent, or one of the things that I represent, Sudan Bukra. This is Sudan of Tomorrow. This is a TV channel that we established for the first time after the September 13th, 2013, I mean the 2013 revolution or uprising that was crushed. After that internet shut down, we realized that you cannot rely on internet and social media. So we thought of many options. Bulk messages was something that we considered at that time, and we knew the challenges. So we came up with we found that we could establish a TV channel, low-cost TV channel that is operated from the cloud by a team of volunteers, low-cost, crowd-funded, content and everything, knowing very well that it is very limited in everything, but it is there to serve a purpose, which is it became very effective during the internet shutdown days, because this was one of the channels used to basically tell everyone in Sudan that this happened, or this will happen, or this will need to happen. So TV, satellite TV is everywhere in Sudan. We have very limited number of cable TVs, but people are still relying on satellite TV. So satellite receivers are everywhere. And basically, after the massacre of the 3rd of June, the organizers and the protesters started telling people with various means, these are the frequencies of Sudan Bukra TV channel, tune to it. And we started like sending messages. I mean, it's videos that we do. I mean, I actually have a Surface machine that I'm using to upload the materials, videos that we get from people, different people. We have content that we create ourselves, and then we use the text line beneath the screen for breaking news or for important messages. So this is, when I say it is low cost, because it is run by volunteers, this is what we pay is only the satellite TV, the satellite channel rent, which is now around $14,000 a month. So you can literally reach millions of people using this, and we're doing this now. Am I on internet here? I can show you what it is. No, I'm not on internet.
Well, there's
So,
open Wi-Fi.
yeah, okay. Because it's on YouTube as well. Yeah, this is on. No?
There's an open one.
There is an open
There
one.
is an
Yes.
open one in there somewhere.
Right up,
Count
down.
five or guess.
Up.
Yeah, this one?
Guess.
Up,
I guess,
one.
yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Okay.
Well, but that's asymmetric communications. You can't really organize people. You can inform them.
You can inform them, yes.
What about like ham radio, which is
What?
long range? Ham radio? I mean, if you're gonna use dial-up, why not just keep going?
What is that?
It's long range radio.
Yeah, but in Sudan, you will be detected, right? If you have your radio station, where are you going to transmit
No,
from?
it's not that kind of radio.
Uh-huh.
It's like CBs, like person-to-person communication via a home set. So not broadcast radio.
Okay, one-to-one. Okay, I don't know this. Maybe we'll have to talk about this.
There should be a,
It's ham is long range radio. It's short wave. It's long range radio communication. It's like a CB, but it travels much farther. Bounces off the ionosphere.
Okay. Anyways, it's okay. It's not. And the last thing, the two things are the portable satellite, and Loon. Of course, we talked with many big, Sudanese who work in many companies, and we got real good intentions from the giants of telecom and civil society organizations and stuff, like EFF and others, but nothing practical came out of this. Google Loon was considered at one point, but for logistical reasons it wasn't possible.
What is Loon?
Loon is the balloons that provide internet connection.
Oh, I see.
And I think in so the closest country that has this to Sudan is Kenya, and Kenya is thousands of kilometers away. So practically they were not able to do it, and there were, I think, also some legal issues with it. So this is the TV channel on YouTube. For some reason the text line is not there, but anyway, so this is a TV channel that's still there, and yeah. So with this. Yeah, this is the local APN solution, and this is the dial-up access, like a representation of the app. So this continued, and then on the 30th of June. So 30th of June, 1989 is when the dictator Omar al-Bashir took power. So with the significance of these dates, the protesters decided. So the 3rd of June was the worst time in our like memory. The worst day in our memory was the massacre that happened. Although it's nothing new. I mean, we're having civil war, so people were killed all the time. But that was and it was brutal because people saw the pictures. I didn't want to put any of the pictures of the massacre, but people were able to leak some of the videos and pictures, and it was horrible. Plus, it came immediately after a very beautiful thing. The sit-in was a very beautiful thing. The protesters started organizing and calling for a big march on the 30th of June, so on the anniversary of the dictator taking power. And they did it without the internet, so there was no Facebook, no Twitter, nothing. And it proved to be a big surprise to everyone. Millions of people literally took out to the streets on the 30th of June with no internet access. And so this is the New York Times. Bouncing back from crackdown, protesters surged through Sudan's streets. They surprised everyone, including the people themselves, the Sudanese people. That, in our living memory, the 30th of June was one of the happiest days. Because everyone was thinking that, the revolution was crushed after the 3rd of June. So you're coming after you've been killed, massacred, raped, and without, you don't know if you're going out to the streets, who else will be there? Has the news about the march reached the others or not? Organizing these rallies happened over across the nation, SMS, voice calls, and satellite TV. And this changed the political equation again. So this was an evidence to the military council and to the regional powers that, maybe you cannot crush this revolution. So maybe it's better to rework with the protesters. So there is now a negotiation process between the military council and the political parties again, an up and down process. Today there is, people are reaching an agreement, and tomorrow it falls, and that. And by this I'm done. Thank you very much for if there is any question, please ask me. Yes.
You said that
These are different and random pictures from Sudan.
you
Yes.
said that American companies can't operate in Sudan.
Yes.
Do you know of any groups that are trying to push for that right now?
Well, I know some Sudanese groups that were trying to do this, but very, they're not very effective, and they are now gaining strength after the revolution with all the media attention. But there is no real American groups.
I mean, like Sudanese groups that want.
Well,
Americans.
there are a few, but I would say individuals. There are a few Sudanese lobbyists that are now trying to do this, but in the past few years it was mainly individuals with ties to Sudanese business society, and some Sudanese Americans who are in the States here.
Do you know any names off the top of your head? Just curious.
I have a friend. I'm not sure his name. He would want his name to be, but I know others that I can. Yeah. So there is something called Sudan Next Gen. Sudan Next Gen is a group of Sudanese Americans founded by Sudanese Americans, and they have a lobbying arm, and not a proper lobbying arm, but they have people who are doing this. They are contacting and talking with the Congress members, senators, and with the political establishment.
Sudan Next Gen.
Sudan Next Gen, yes.
Okay.
They are on Facebook and they are on Twitter. Sudan Next Gen. Any other questions?
I mean, given the history of coup d'etats
Yes.
over more recent history, I mean, it doesn't lend to a good political environment for economic development.
Well, the coup d'etats are never, I mean, the military governments are never a good environment for anything. The Sudan is one of the richest countries in the region. It was one of the largest. So we had oil, we had, and this is important because with the separation of the South, most of our oil resources went with the South, with South Sudan. But for 10 years we had been exporting oil, and basically nothing, we haven't seen any of the revenue of that oil. And we're basically an agricultural country. We have the two Niles and the third Nile, the River Nile. This is one of the richest lands for agriculture, but it used to produce a lot of crops that we were exporting. It's almost dead because of the government or the dictatorship. Dictatorships and corrupt leaders don't really want to wait to get money, so they can just sell land and they sell. So even the oil money did not help in the development of Sudan. It was not used to develop the agriculture or the industrial sectors of Sudan.
Well, it's probably just embezzled by an oligarchy of whoever's at the top, right?
Yeah, exactly, yes. And they end up having millions and millions and millions, and people die because they don't have the basic necessities of life. And you see this across the region. It's not only in Sudan. There are. I'm very hopeful and I'm very optimistic with what's happening in the African side of that region, not the Middle Eastern side, unfortunately. I used to live in United Arab Emirates until last year, so most of my life I was in the Middle East. But I'm optimistic with what's happening in countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda. Rwanda emerged from far worse than what we've seen in Sudan now. They emerged from genocide in less than 7 months, killing almost 1 million people, and it is now one of the most developed countries in Africa and in Africa. So you have these countries, and Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the second largest country population-wise, more than 100 million people, very rich in history, but it has been poor for whatever we remember. But they had leaders who achieved peace, democracy, and they are very strong against. They have very strong stands against corruption, and it is now one of the most influential countries and most developing countries in Africa. So with dictatorships come corruption and come civil wars, because you have to divide to rule usually. When in the cases of many African countries we see leaders who are truly committed to their people, they achieve peace, they achieve democracy, they fight corruption, and then in a matter of 20 years, like what happened in Rwanda, you can see a country like Rwanda now, and other examples as well. Tanzania now is a growing example of a country going in the same way. Kenya, despite its challenges, and Ethiopia is, in my view, it's our neighbor. It's the biggest example. I would like to see, and I would like when we see this revolution, we see that there is hope for us, that we can learn from our neighbors and we can be like them in developing our country. So the diversity, the Nile, the history, this is what I want you to remember about Sudan. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.